suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I do regret my attempts, and I'm so glad that I did not succeed. If you're that low, right, that you've lost all hope, hold on, right? Reach out and ask for help because there is always help available. I didn't do that. Call 988, which is the suicide hotline. Reach out for help because things can always get better. You feel so alone. I think that's the issue, right? You feel like no one understands what you're going through. You feel like you're a burden to other people. And I think there is hopefully someone out there that you can always talk to, like even if it's someone on a hotline that will be able to empathize with you and get you the help that you need.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much again for your time today, and for being willing to share your story. So I guess let's just jump in. Let's I guess start from the beginning.
Sure. So in my mid to late 20s, I was diagnosed first with anorexia and hospitalized twice for that. The first time for 6 months and the second time for 4 months, a year apart. And the second time I was working as in a consumer promotion development manager for a very large packaged goods firm. And the second time after I lost my job, I was let go. It was before the American with Disabilities Act, so it wasn't illegal. And I got very depressed and attempted suicide for the second time and was hospitalized in a hospital on an acute unit in Manhattan where they diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a pervasive diagnosis, which means it's across all aspects of your life. And people with borderline personality disorder have a great fear of abandonment, have problems with mood regulation, problems with relationships. They tend to self-harm, which I was doing. I was cutting myself. They tend to attempt suicide. I had 2 suicide attempts at that point. They have a very unstable sense of self. They feel very chaotic inside. Sometimes they tend to lose touch with reality, and they tend to be impulsive. And there's some other criteria also. And they have to meet 5 of the 9 criteria. And I met obviously 5 of the 9 criteria. And then from that unit in Manhattan, I was transferred up to New York Presbyterian Hospital in Westchester. And at that time, they had a long-term unit for people with borderline personality disorder. And that was being treated with what was then a new therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, which was a skills-based therapy. New at that time, but it's very popular now. It's been expanded to a lot of different other populations. So I was there for 10 months. That was before managed care. So obviously those kind of units no longer exist, which is a shame. And from then I was living in a halfway house, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week supervised residence, and attending their borderline personality disorder day program, which is when you go during the day and then you go home at night. And I did that for 18 months. And still living in the halfway house. And then an old boss of mine called me and asked me to go back to work for her at another very large company in Westchester, because this was all in Westchester. And I tried to do that for a year and I just couldn't do it. I just was not the same person I was. And I left there and kind of floundered around for a year or so, trying to be in therapy and not doing much of anything. And and then all of a sudden, I just stopped all my medication and stopped therapy, and I spiraled down really fast, becoming suicidal again. And I was in a women's group, and the women's group uh, leader referred me to a psychiatrist who specialized in treating people with borderline personality disorder. It was supposed to be a one-time, this is 2005 already, um, medication consultation. And she specialized in treating people with borderline personality with a lesser known therapy called transference-focused psychotherapy, called TFP. And it was different than DBT. And I know it all sounds like a lot of alphabet soup. Um, and DBT is a very much in the present kind of here and now therapy, and transference focused psychotherapy is a more of a psychodynamic kind of therapy where you go back into your childhood and you look at past relationships, and it's really based on the relationship between the therapist and the client, and you take a hard look at how that develops and how that applies to other patterns in your life. And so I saw her for the medication consultation, and then she asked me if I wanted to work with her. And surprisingly, I was surprised, and I said, yes, I did. And we worked together for 11 years, twice a week. And there's a contract that's set up in the beginning. And it said if I went below a certain weight, I would be hospitalized. If I cut myself, I had to seek medical attention. And if I attempted suicide, that she would do everything that she could to help save me, but she would end the treatment. And so that was 2005. And, I have to say that she didn't take insurance, and to give her credit, she generously really lowered her fee so I could work with her, because she was a very experienced psychiatrist. And in 2013, my mother had passed away in 2002. And in 2013, my father passed away. And he was an alcoholic while I was growing up, and we had a very conflicted relationship. And I had a lot of feelings about him passing away. And in 2014, I developed a depression after he passed away. And in 2014, I attempted suicide again, and was in a medical hospital for a couple of days and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. And I was petrified that this psychiatrist would sever ties with me because of the contract. And she didn't. She took me back. And that's when some of the most intense work, between us began. And I terminated with her at the end of 2016. And, I credit our work together with really saving my life and giving me a life worth living. And I did go back to see her in 2018. I had a stroke in 2018, and I got very depressed because it affected me cognitively. And I'm doing okay today after a lot of work with a neuropsychologist, rehabilitative neuropsychologist, and gradually going back to work where I was after a long absence. But so, it's been a long, arduous journey, about 3 decades. But today I'm thriving. I got my master's of social work, and I'm a therapist helping other people, that are, going through the journey that I once did. And I'm a writer, a published writer, and a blogger. And I blog and write primarily about mental health and recovery. and I'm doing great.
Wow, Andrea. So what was the 2014 you said was the last suicide attempt, and that was number.
Suicide attempt, and yeah, the most recent one, that was number 4. Yeah,
And you said you've been thriving, so I imagine those tendencies have not cropped up since.
that hasn't cropped again. I haven't been hospitalized in, so this March 2024 was 10 years since my last suicide attempt, and 10 years since my last psychiatric hospitalization.
Wow, good for you. Good for you. What was the relationship like with mom and dad? I mean, you mentioned your dad was an alcoholic. Obviously, that's a struggle. How were those relationships?
He was emotionally and verbally abusive. When he was intoxicated, he could be very cruel. He was very intelligent, so he knew how to use his words to hurt us. I had a younger brother. I have a younger brother. Um, he he liked to, under the guise of broadening my horizons, he liked to take me to museums and kind of quiz me on the paintings, who painted that, like especially the Met. We grew up in New York City, so he liked to take me to the Met and, ask me about the Impressionist paintings, and then he would take me to. We had 2 dogs. One was show quality, so he liked to take me to the Westminster Dog Show and ask me about the breeds and what groups they belonged to, and I didn't know the answer. I was a kid, so I felt inadequate and stupid, and never thought I was good enough to please him. And we played chess a lot because he liked chess, and I always lost. And I just never felt good enough for him. And mhm. No, and when I was 12, I'm sorry, when I was 12, he lost his job. He worked on Wall Street, and my mother had to go to work to support the family. And he retreated. He got sober, but he had been medicating a depression with the booze, and he retreated into his depression and never worked again. So my mother had to go to work to support our family.
I imagine after years and years and years of reflection, which I think you've had and gone through, you must have been asking yourself, what was missing in his life, in my father's life, right? What was he escaping? What pain was he trying to dull, right? Why did he dive headfirst into alcohol, right? And what year were we talking about here again?
Um, 73, early 70s. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned, he's on Wall Street, he's an analyst on Wall Street, high performer, probably values career quite, prioritizes career quite highly. And I think, mental health was not exactly something in those days that mental health wasn't something that men really talked about, right? It wasn't really accepted as, hey, what's going on with you mentally, dude? Right. So,
Well, his parents were, European immigrants. They were not the warmest people. They sent him to boarding school. Um, he was an only child. So I think that had a lot to do with it. Um, I don't think, talking with some of my therapists later, we kind of came up with the notion that he had an undiagnosed schizoid personality disorder, which means he was a loner, right? He didn't have any friends, no friends, no relationships outside of his marriage and outside of his children. Um, he, um, like men usually do, right? They have friends and relationships. He had nothing, right? He just, he was um, just preferred to be by himself. No support system. Um, he just preferred his Johnny Walker Red. And so when his world collapsed, he had nothing to turn to except the depression, except inward.
no, you said several times, like you never felt good enough.
No,
And a theme through your writing was sort of that I kind of caught up on was he seemed to be quizzing you a lot
yeah.
or testing you or what was that about?
I think under it was his way of thinking he was, making me smarter, broadening my horizons. His warped way of love. I mean, the one thing he, in his defense, I was a big softball player in high school and college, and he's the one that, got me started. He used to spend hours with me throwing in the park near our apartment building, and he's the one that bought me my first glove and showed me how to, make a pocket in it and oil it, wrap it, stuff like that. So we had some good times together. I have some good memories of him, but mostly not, you know.
So relationship with mom, was that better?
We were very close. Yes, it was better, much better. We were very close. She was my biggest supporter, biggest cheerleader. Even when I got ill, she was always there for me. She's the one when I first developed anorexia, the therapist I was seeing kind of never said anything, and my mother was the one that actually hospitalized me because I was dying. Um, out of love and concern. So, and she's the one that came to see me every weekend and just she was the best. Yeah.
So her passing in '02 left you with just your dad.
And my brother,
Oh, and your brother. Yeah,
my
yeah, right,
brother,
right, right.
yeah, my brother, he's only 18 months younger than I am, so we're very close. He's like my best friend. He just stepped up to the plate in every way.
Oh, excellent. Well, good for him. Fantastic. So I get, the whole question of heredity versus environment thing. Where do what are your thoughts there? Were you, do you feel, after these years of introspection that you were born with a perfect slate and your environment, your upbringing is really what threw things askew, or was it more genetics or a combination of both, or what are your thoughts there?
We like to say genes load the gun and environment pulls the trigger, right? So I think it was somewhat genes because I think I have my dad's DNA wired for depression and addiction, right? Because anorexia is kind of like an addiction, right? You kind of, you get caught up in that web of restricting and the high that you get when you feel hungry and you see the numbers on the scale drop. Um, and the Marshall Linehan, who developed, is the psychologist that developed DBT. For borderline personality, she talked about an invalidating environment. And that's when your feelings as a child are um, ignored, right? So, like when a child comes home and says, I had a hard day at school, and your parent says, and this is when they didn't know anything in the 60s, they didn't know any better, and says, "Oh, you'll be fine. Just go play in your room," right? Instead of the parent saying, "Well, what happened? Tell me about it." Or when I heard this a lot, or I cried very easily. I was a very sensitive child, and you start crying, and someone says, like your father says, "Stop crying, or I'll really give you something to cry about."
Oh yeah, I've heard that growing up all the time. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Yep, I probably heard that
Yeah,
150 times.
yeah,
Yep, 100%. I mean, again, not we're not making excuses, but we have to look at reality, right? You mentioned your dad's parents being immigrants, and I mean, you look at the generational, realities, and life was hard, right? I mean, gosh, only a few generations ago, I mean, parents did not know if their kids or them were going to eat. I mean, we're not talking about thousands of years ago. We're just talking about couple hundred. I mean, so, life was definitely harder. So again, not making excuses, but gosh, I would want to think they're doing the best they can given, given the palette they have in front of them, given the realities they have in front of them. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. He did the best he could with what he had. Yeah, and that's true. Um, he he um he's also the type of person that never should have been a parent, but that's what you did, right? You did that. That's what you did in the 50s and the 60s. You got married and you had children.
Right, right, yeah. It's the
Yeah.
it's the one kind of job that it's one of the most important jobs in the world, and there's zero qualification. There's no qualification test for it. You just be born and you get older and you can have the job. And many of us do a shitty job of it. So, yeah. Yeah. So Andrew, what kind of work do you do now? What's your specialty?
So I'm a psychotherapist. Um, I work in an outpatient clinic in the city. I'm actually in the city 2 days a week, and I work remotely 3 days a week. I see people with all kinds of diagnoses, all ages, well, adults anyway, right now. So I've been doing this for 24 years, um, and I enjoy it immensely because I get to help people, and I know I don't disclose. I mean, if anybody goes on the internet, it's easy enough to find, but I don't share because I don't find it helpful because I want the focus to remain on my clients. So
I mean, in your opinion, I mean, over the years, I guess, have you seen meaningful sort of progress, with technology and therapies? And, it wasn't that many years ago, and I think we're still using it, right? It's electroshock therapy, and I don't know. It just seems like we're still in the primitive stages of understanding the brain and all the stuff that's going on in there. Like is electroshock therapy still being used? And what's the latest greatest there? What's going on there? Therapy.
it's still a thing. It's still used for severe depression. Um, it is. It's actually not the like crude therapy that you saw in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is the association. But I've had it. I've had a course of it. It actually the side effect for me was that it kind of obliterated my memory for a short. There's a chunk of my memory that's gone that I can't remember. Um, it helped me, but it didn't. It wasn't sustainable, right? Um, the effects only lasted like a month or so. So I would never do it again if I fell into another severe depression. Um, so um, I mean the the two therapies that have helped me because of the BPD were dialectical therapy gave me the skills and they laid a foundation for me, right? But the TFP was really able to integrate all the separate parts of me and allowed me to function as a whole. And the dialectical behavior therapy um, allowed me to not fall apart. I use the skills from the dialectical behavior therapy to be able to tolerate the intense emotions that I was undergoing while we did the um, TFP, because we really in the transference focused psychotherapy we really dug deep, like if you can imagine like reopening old wounds and like getting all the pus out, like really digging deep, and that nobody had ever gone so deep before, kind of like ripping out a foundation, like just gutting an old house.
Yeah, I sort of have the image of, as your brain's developing through adolescence and, these traumas are coming in, and all these, it's almost like building a house, right? Physical, like it's almost like you're building a house and, as you're building the house, there's all these defects along the way. Like the people building the house aren't building it to code, right? And then finally you get to the roof and the house is finished, and the analogy there is like you're an adult, your brain's done developing, but there's all these defects and you got to go back down and, rebuild a house and rebuild the
Hmm.
foundation after the whole thing's built, which is obviously not
Yeah.
the way you do it, right? So Andrew, are you still in therapy?
No, no. The psychiatrist that did my TFP still manages my medication, and I will always be on medication for the rest of my life, antidepressants, right? You hear about people wanting to get off their antidepressants. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, yeah. I know antidepressants can be controversial, or I think that they are overprescribed. But I also think they absolutely have a place and do help people for sure. And I imagine you're in that latter group.
Hmm.
Andrew, what year did you get your master's?
2000.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that strikes me as extremely admirable. I mean, going through grad school while going through all this, I can imagine it's quite difficult.
It was also, good distraction. Gave me something to focus on, to throw myself into the work. I had some very good mentors um, to encourage me and coach me, um, and they helped me along the way. Um, and I came out with a 4.0, which was really nice. And yeah, and there was a time I had to take a leave of absence, obviously, and um, but I needed to work because I needed to support myself. You know.
We talked about your relationship with your mom and dad and your brother. I mean, they always say, the best indicator of longevity and a healthy life are your close personal relationships and how healthy those relationships are. Um, Going through all this, I mean, did you have a circle of friends, someone you would call and just, that just someone that would just call and say, "How are you?" Someone you would call and just cry with. Like, did you have that?
Um, I did. I had at that point I had friends from the program I was in, um, that I mentioned, the DBT day program. So we had a bunch of good friends from there that we would get together, hang out, you know, go into the city with, stuff like that. I don't really see those people anymore. A lot of them have spread all over the country. Right now, I have a really good circle of friends from various jobs that I've been in. Um, I worked for one outpatient clinic from 2000, 2007 to 2015. I just had dinner with a couple of them last night. I worked from another company from 2015 to 2021. I'm still in touch with a bunch of people from there. So, so those are my family of creation. We have your family of origin and your family of creation.
Yeah, yeah, I like
So,
that. Yeah, relatives versus family, right? They're not always the same group of people.
mhm,
Interesting. Yeah.
mhm.
So, Andrew, I guess folks listening, that perhaps are going through something similar. What bits of advice do you have for them? Now that they've sort of heard your story, and obviously every story is very unique, but there's I'm sure there's a lot of relatable points to what some folks are going through. What would you say to them?
So if you're that low, right, that you've lost all hope, hold on, right? Reach out and ask for help because there is always help available. And that's, I didn't I didn't do that. And I can't say that. I can say that I do regret my attempts and I'm so glad that I did not succeed. Um and call 988, which is the suicide hotline. Um reach out for help because things can always get better. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You feel so alone. I think that's the issue, right? You feel like no one understands what you're going through. Um, you feel like you're a burden to other people. I think there is hopefully someone out there that you can always talk to, like even if it's someone on a hotline that will kind of be able to empathize with you and get you the help that you need.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I notice is no matter what you're going through, obviously suicide, feeling suicidal is on the very severe spectrum, right? But no matter what you're going through, it seems like going inward is never the solution, right? Reaching out, asking for help, talking to friends, to family, even someone on a hotline. To your point, is always seems to be just immensely better than going inward. I just feel like that always creates a downward spiral. You get this self-fulfilling negative spiral. You just keep telling yourself that negative story. When reaching out, you get that entirely new perspective. Hmm. So, Andrea, I mean, switching gears a little bit, what do you got going on, social media wise, or books or blogs? What have you been doing outside of work?
So I have an ongoing blog on the website of Psychology Today. It's titled From Both Sides of the Couch.
Clever, nice, I like
I
it.
write I write about mostly mental health and recovery, but I also write about I've been expanding a little bit. Um, I write about my last post was called "Is Good Enough Good Enough?" Meaning, you know, um, talking about feeling good enough, feeling pressure, um, like especially at my job. Um, am I good enough for feeling pressure to be perfect or adequate? Which I think is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah.
Any plans
Um,
for a book? You writing a book anytime soon?
I am writing a book. I'm writing a memoir. I don't have an agent or anything like that. It's still in the very early stages. So yeah.
Well, Andrea, I mean, I want to thank you again for sharing your story with us. Any last words you want to leave us with?
I really hope that this will reach people that are struggling, right? And I just want them to know that recovery is possible, right? That, if even if they're not struggling from anorexia or depression or BPD, that uh that they want to um know that even if they're struggling from bipolar disorder or something else, another eating disorder or another mood disorder or you know or PTSD or OCD or something like that, that you know recovery is possible. And I also want to mention that if the first therapist you find is not the right therapist for you, then please keep looking, because the psychiatrist I found that did TFP was not my first therapist. She was actually, you know, the fourth therapist and that's uh, partly what my book is focused on, that I saw, like the fourth major therapist that I saw. And, if I hadn't persevered, then I don't know where I'd be.
Well, Andrea, thank you again for sharing your story and for your time. I really really appreciate it. So, I will be in touch when this publishes. But have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you for your time.